part of what happened and the reasons for the 20th revolution against the British occupation in Iraq, and the results of this popular revolution. Forgotten Flames, the 1920 revolution against British occupation in Iraq. Today, we're diving into a chapter often overlooked in the history books, the 1920 revolution against British occupation in Iraq. So grab a seat and let's journey back in time. Our story begins in the aftermath of World War I, a time of shifting borders and colonial ambitions. The Ottoman Empire had collapsed, and the British Empire seized the opportunity to expand its influence in the Middle East. To understand the 1920 revolution, we need to grasp the geopolitical landscape of the time. Iraq, formerly part of the Ottoman Empire, became a British mandate under the League of Nations after the war. As the British moved in, discontent among the Iraqi population grew. Heavy taxes, arbitrary arrests, and a sense of cultural disrespect fueled a rising tide of resentment. The spark for the revolution came in April 1920 when Iraqis gathered in the city of Al-Qut to protest against the British presence. The protests soon escalated, spreading across the country. Leaders like Sheikh Mohammed al-Sawad, a prominent tribal figure, and Ayatollah Mohammad Taqi al-Shirazi played crucial roles in organizing and leading the resistance. The Iraqi rebels faced numerous challenges, from the superior military might of the British forces to internal divisions among the various tribal and religious groups. However, their determination was unwavering. The revolution took a more militant turn as the Iraqis began to engage British forces in armed conflict. Guerrilla warfare tactics became a hallmark of their resistance. The 1920 revolution marked a turning point. While the British eventually suppressed the uprising, the resilience of the Iraqi people planted the seeds for future struggles for independence. The legacy of the 1920 revolution is still felt today, as it laid the groundwork for Iraq's eventual independence in 1932. The sacrifices of those who fought against occupation are an integral part of Iraq's national identity. And there you have it, the 1920 revolution against British occupation in Iraq, a chapter that deserves more recognition in the annals of history. We will give a more detailed account of the historical era. The Iraqi revolt began in Baghdad in the summer of 1920 with mass demonstrations by Iraqis, including protests by embittered officers from the old Ottoman army against the British who published the new land ownership and the burial taxes at Najaf. The revolt gained momentum when it spread to the largely tribal Shia regions of the Middle and Lower Euphrates. Sheikh Mehdi al-Khalisi was a prominent Shia leader of the revolt, using heavy artillery and aerial bombardment. The uprising was suppressed by the British. Sunni and Shia religious communities cooperated during the revolution as well as tribal communities, the urban masses, and many Iraqi officers in Syria. The objectives of the revolution were independence from British rule and the creation of an Arab government. The revolt achieved some initial success, but by the end of October 1920, the British had suppressed the revolt, although elements of it dragged on until 1922. During the 1920s, revolts against the fragile and new state of Iraq took place in the northern part of the country by the Kurds, who were trying to gain independence. One of the major Kurdish leaders of the Kurdish revolt was Sheikh Mahmoud Barzanji. In 1918, an anti-British rebellion took place in the Iraqi city of Najaf, which is often seen as a precursor to the 1920 Iraqi revolt. After the peace treaty of Versailles in 1919 after World War I, the idea put forward by the League of Nations to create mandates for the territories that the defeated Central Powers had occupied began to take shape. The principle was that the territories should eventually become independent, albeit under the tutelage of one of the victorious Entente countries. People in Ottoman provinces began to fear the mandate concept since it seemed to suggest European imperial rule by another name. At the San Remo Conference in April 1920, Britain was awarded the Mandate for Mesopotamia, as Iraq was called in the Western world, and a mandate for Palestine. In Iraq, the British administration fired most of the former Ottoman officials, and the new administration had mainly British officials. Many Iraqis began to fear that Iraq would be incorporated into the British Empire. One of the most eminent Shia mujtahid, Ayatollah Mohammad Taqi al-Shirazi, then issued a fatwa declaring that service in the British administration was unlawful. There was growing resentment toward new British policies, such as new land ownership laws. This upset tribal leaders, especially when it came to a new tax for burial in the Wadi as-Salam cemetery in Najaf, where Shia from worldwide came to be buried. Meetings between Shia ulama and tribal leaders discussed strategies for peaceful protests, but they considered violent action if they failed to get results. Discontent with British rule materialized in May 1920 with the onset of mass meetings and demonstrations in Baghdad. The start of the revolution was centered on peaceful protests against British rule. There were large gatherings at both Sunni and Shia mosques, which showed that cooperation between the two main sects of Iraqi society was possible. At one of the larger meetings, 15 representatives were nominated to present the case for Iraqi independence to the British officials. Acting Civil Commissioner Arnold Wilson dismissed their demands as impractical. An armed revolt broke out in late June 1920. Ayatollah al-Shirazi issued another fatwa which read, "It is the duty of the Iraqis to demand their rights. In demanding them they should maintain peace and order. But if the English prevent them from obtaining their rights it is permitted to make use of defensive force." This seemed to encourage armed revolt. The British authorities tried to counter this by arresting a sheikh of the Zawalan tribe. Later, an armed band of loyal tribal warriors stormed the prison and set him free. The revolt soon gained momentum as the British garrisons in the mid-Euphrates region were weak and the armed tribes much stronger. By late July, the armed tribal rebels controlled most of the mid-Euphrates region. The success of the tribes caused the revolt to spread to the lower Euphrates and all around Baghdad. The British War Secretary, Winston Churchill, authorized immediate reinforcements from Iran that included 2 squadrons of the Royal Air Force. The use of aircraft shifted the advantage to the British and played a huge role in ending the revolt. Some tribes worked against the revolt since they were recognized by the British authorities and profited from the acknowledgement. Eventually, the rebels began to run low on supplies and funding and could not support the revolt for much longer, and the British forces had become more effective. The revolt ended in October 1920, when the rebels surrendered Najaf and Karbala to the British authorities. After the revolution was declared in Baghdad, it spread like wildfire to the south, notably to Al-Rumaytha town. The Duwalim or Zawalan tribe, which was led by Sheikh Shalan Abu al-Jun, declared war against the British and advocated for the independence of Iraq. The governor of Al-Diwaniyah, Major Clive Kirkpatrick Dolly, had instructed Deputy Lieutenant P.T. Hyatt in Al-Rumaytha to arrest him, which caused the Zawalan tribe, under the leadership of Sheikh Gadith Harjan, to revolt and rescue him from prison. The British were worried that the incident in Al-Rumaytha would spread to other parts of the region and would become a widespread issue. It was theorized that the uprising was orchestrated by outsiders from Najaf, who opposed the British mandate, rather than it being a general attack against the British administration. The arrest of Sheikh Shalan Abu al-Jun had caused unrest. It resulted in his followers wrecking railway systems and other infrastructure, such as bridges. The attacks were supported by various Iraqi officers, which made the attacks appear to be well coordinated and potent. The group of rebels grew and got more support. A few of the leaders Shaikh of the rebellion assembled on the 11th of July 1920 and wrote a letter to the district's British political officer, in which they requested for Iraq to gain independence. Al-Qadar is a small village on the left bank of the Euphrates River. On the 30th of July, Hadi al-Makouder arrived from the city of Najaf to incite the inhabitants of the village to join the revolt. He succeeded, as the tribes living in that area began to sabotage the railway and telegraph lines passing through the area. The commander of the British forces in Iraq, General Haldane, ordered the forces stationed at the Qadar train station to withdraw immediately to the city of Nasiriyah, where the tribes that joined the revolution then attacked the station. This was on the 13th of August, when they were shooting towards the station. The station had a regular train and 2 armored trains, but soon an incident happened to the first armored vehicle, which led to a problem. The British troops went by regular train only, and the train arrived at Ur station safely in the same evening. The guards of the city of Samawa were divided into 2 sections, one of which was led by Colonel Hay and camped on the river in a place called Hsija Coast near the city, and the second was led by Captain Raisel and encamped around the city train station that was near the city wall. Both sections became encircled after the British withdrew from the village of Al-Qadar, and the rebels tightened the siege on them day after day. On the 26th of August, 3 warships and 2 regular ships moved from Nasiriyah to rescue the forces in Samawa. After fierce battles between the rebels and the ships, 2 warships and a regular ship reached the Samawa guards after the withdrawal of one of the warships on the 27th of August and returned to Nasiriyah. The rebels managed to seize one of the regular ships. The station fell into the hands of the rebels after fierce battles between them and the British forces. When the British forces tried to get out of the station camp by train, a large number of bodies fell from both sides during the confrontation. After this battle, the rebels besieged the main guard's camp, which was led by Colonel Hay, and asked him to surrender, but Colonel Hay rejected the request. The siege lasted for about 2 months until they were rescued on the 14th of November. The commander of the British forces in Iraq sent a telegram to General Congham, who was busy quelling the rebellion in the Diyala region, asking him to return to Baghdad on the 16th of September. On the 1st of October, General Congham moved his forces from the city of Ur, heading north. On the 6th of that month, he arrived at Al-Qadar, where he was able to occupy it after he encountered resistance from the rebels. While moving towards the city of Samawa, The British forces burned down the villages on both sides of the Euphrates River near the town of Al-Qadr. On the 12th of the same month, the British forces arrived near Samawa and approached the city on the next day, where they faced strong resistance from the rebels stationed around the city. After a fierce battle, the rebels withdrew from their fortified positions. On the 14th day, when the British troops entered the city facing no resistance, they broke the siege of the British forces, which were confined to the coast of Hassaja near the city. On the 12th of November, a battle took place between the British forces and the rebels of Bani Hajim clans at Sour Bridge, also known as the Imam Abdullah Bridge, located 6 kilometers north of the city of Samawa, in which 50 people were killed and more wounded. The number of British deaths was between 40 and 50. Due to this battle, General Congham summoned a person named Mr. Mohammed to negotiate with the Bani Hajim tribes. After negotiations between the two sides, an agreement on the conditions of withdrawal was finally signed in the city of Samo between the parties on the 20th of November with the Bani Hajim and Fakhauda tribes. Al-Rumaitha town was handed over after signing this agreement between the two parties. It should also be noted that the British did not arrest any of the elders of Bani Hajim. A key part of the revolt took place in Karbala, with families from all segments of society fighting together, such as the Alawad and the Kumana families. All of them were united by a proclamation to stand together and fight for their right to an independent nation. The faction led by the Alawad and Kumana families fought to establish Islamic rule throughout Iraq. In addition to the families fighting, the Shiite tribes encouraged the people to keep resisting British rule. Both factions fought ruthlessly and fought the British effectively. This was the strongest resistance the British had encountered. The Alawad family was often mentioned by Gertrude Bell in her letters, such as those sent from Baghdad. There was great carnage in Karbala, and many families were sent to prison camps on various islands. Some returned, but many did not survive. Women and their children were alone. Their men were missing, some ran away to seek refuge, and many gathered in their houses, so if they died, they all died at once. Some families and militiamen agreed with the British that they would be rewarded with land and beautiful houses if they fought on the British side. The fight in Najaf. A force from the Bani Hassan clan took control of the Kifl region south of Hilla, calling on the occupying authorities to send a large force called Berdo. Orders were issued to shoot at them when the revolutionaries appeared. The revolutionaries inferred the location of the force. They tried to crawl over them. The British forces suffered heavy losses, after which they issued orders to withdraw. One of the results of that battle was the evacuation of the British from many regions in Musayyib and Hindi and the joining of the clans of Daghara and Afaf, and the liberation of the rest of the surrounding areas. The rebel clans advanced toward the Tamaziyah, and in the meantime, the Bani Hassan tribe managed to liberate the region of Turij without resistance. The rebel tribes were headed by Amrin Sadaun al-Abbasi. The revolutionaries were subjected to bombing by British aircraft and other types of weapons. The masses of the rebel clans headed to the Sidat al-Hindi. The British military commander considered this a threat to Baghdad, especially after the rebels attacked the railway from Hilla to Baghdad and Bani Hassan drowned the British battleship Firefly in the Euphrates. The British failed to keep the revolt confined to the southern and central parts of the Euphrates region. Tribes along the Diyala River, which is in the northwestern part, had joined the revolt around late July. Their participation was fueled by a tactic of the rebels, in which they sent out messengers to other parts of the country to spread the news of rebellion. The most prominent tribe in the Diyala region at the time was the Azza. Their sheikh, Habib al-Qaisran, was apprehensive of the hazardous venture. However, he was arrested not long after, and soon after his release he expressed his support of the revolt. Diyala had a vital geographical position at the time, as many railways to Persia crossed through it. This line was swiftly cut off by the rebels. Battles of the Assyrians. As the Assyrian manned force became more disciplined, they rendered excellent service. During the Arab rebellion of the 1920s, they displayed, under conditions of the greatest trial, steadfast loyalty to their British officers. In 1920, the Assyrians had given proof of their great discipline and fighting qualities when the Assyrian camps at Mindan and Bakoba were attacked by Arab forces, with the Assyrians defeating and driving off the Arabs. British officers claimed the Assyrians were veterans and skilled against their enemies. Most of the men who signed up to the British Army were indeed veterans from the Assyrian War of Independence. One officer believes the reason that the Assyrians displayed such excellence was due to the Assyrians believing that they would be given independence after the revolution by the British. At the end of July, the majority of the southern and mid-Euphrates area was controlled by the rebels. This inspired Kurds in southern Kurdistan to start a rebellion of their own. They succeeded in seizing a number of towns, but the insurgency quickly fizzled out as they proved to lack a unifying force. Most leaders were content to fall under British rule, as it provided them with a bureaucratic and consistent system. They eventually faltered on choosing a single leader and lacked communication when it came to organizing a successful revolution. Rebels taking control of Shaban. It was announced in the town of Sharab in Miqdadia on the 14th of August, where Bani Tamim clan attacked the town. People of the town have cooperated with the clan as happened in the town of Kalis, but the governmental Sarai, where the British and the soldiers of the Shabana were staying, failed to surrender to the rebels. After hours of confrontation between the two sides, the rebels managed to take control of the governmental Sarai Kushla. In the evening, 5 Britons serving in the Sarai were killed in the battle. After controlling the town, the rebels cut off the railway running through the town. In Sharaban, after the rebels managed to control the town, there was a big conflict between the town elders and the Bani Tamim clan, which resulted in battles between them. On the 7th of September, the British troops, led by General Congham, arrived near the town. After an unequal battle between the clans and the British troops, the latter managed to enter the town on the 9th of September. On the 14th of August, the Dalwa clan, under the leadership of its leader Khesro Bek, attacked the city of Konakin. The city was occupied with little resistance. The rebels and those with them looted Dar al-Saray and all the governmental departments in the city. They took down the British flag and took up the Ottoman flag. The rebels appointed Khurshid Bek as the ruler of the city. The clans of Khazarbat also attacked the British, occupied the town and looted its building of the governmental Sarai. On the morning of the 16th of August, the Konakin revolutionists, led by Karim Khurshid Bek, attacked the Bawa Mahmud camp, where the British army was holed up after the arrival of the reinforcements. A battle ensued between the two teams, ending with the defeat of the rebels, leaving 15 dead. On the 19th of August, a British force led by Colonel Caskell arrived in the vicinity of Konakin without any resistance. The latter, along with his forces, punished the villages that joined the revolution. The next day, the colonel succeeded in conquering Konakin. On the evening of the 24th of August, the siege was lifted from the garrison of Kargan, where British soldiers were holed up, and the governor of Karlsabad Ahmed Dara had taken refuge there. On the 27th of August, the British forces took control of the town of Kayslarbat. On the 22nd of August, Ibrahim Khan, one of the leaders of the Dalwa clan, went with his companions to ascend to the top of Jabal Baba Shah Sawar, overlooking the city of Kafri, and opened fire on the governmental Sarai in the town. The assistant of the town's ruler, Captain Salmon, went himself to the mountain to negotiate with Ibrahim Khan, and as soon as the former arrived at the mountain, he was surprised by the rebels arresting him. The rebels attacked the town and occupied the governmental Sarai and took down the British flag. As soon as the news of the occupation of the town by the rebels reached Kirkuk's ruler, Major Lunkirk, he moved with his army towards the town. After a bloody battle, the British forces conquered the town. On the 27th of August, the governor of Nasiriyah, Major Dabrin, who was a former political governor in 1918, visited the town of Suk al-Shaykh, where he met with the chiefs of the town and tried to convince them not to join the revolution. As soon as Magoger Digber has returned to the city of Nasiriyah, he wrote a report to the British governor in Baghdad, Arnold Wilson. The assistant of the political ruler of the town, Captain Platts, and his British companions managed to escape from the town on the 1st of September by a British steamer anchored there, and the ship steered them safely towards Nasiriyah. There was no looting for the town of Sauk al-Shaykh, as the rest of the towns of Lu'a Muntafik suffered from looting and destruction of the governmental Sarai. Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Haidar managed to preserve all these properties. On the 4th of September, 2 military ships left Nasiriyah, and the 2 ships arrived at the Hawar, located south of Sauk al-Shaykh. Both were heavily armed by the rebels, and a battle between the two sides lasted for approximately half an hour. The British had an assistant political officer, Major J.E. Barlow, stationed in Tal Afar. 2,050 to 10,000 Iraqis and around 1,000 British and Indian soldiers died during the revolt. The RAF flew missions totaling 4,008 hours, dropped 97 tons of bombs, and fired 183,861 rounds for the loss of 9 men killed, 7 wounded, and 11 aircraft destroyed behind rebel lines. The revolt caused British officials to drastically reconsider their strategy in Iraq. The revolt cost the British government £40 million, which was twice the amount of the annual budget allotted for Iraq and a huge factor in reconsidering their strategy in Iraq. It had cost more than the entire British-funded Arab rising against the Ottoman Empire in 917,191. The new colonial secretary, Winston Churchill, decided a new administration was needed in Iraq as well as the British colonies in the Middle East, so called for a large conference in Cairo. In March 1921 at the Cairo Conference, British officials discussed the future of Iraq. The British now wanted to control Iraq through more indirect means, mainly by installing former officials friendly to the British government. They eventually decided to install Faisal ibn al-Hussein bin Ali al-Hashimi as king of Iraq, as part of what was informally called the Sharifian solution. Faisal had worked with the British before in the Arab Revolt during World War I, and he enjoyed good relations with certain important officials. British officials also thought installing Faisal as king would prevent Faisal from fighting the French in Syria and damaging British-French relations. For Iraqis, the revolt served as part of the founding of Iraqi nationalism, although this conclusion is debated by scholars. It also showed unprecedented cooperation between Shia and Sunni Muslims, although this cooperation did not last much longer than the end of the revolt. His fatwas and his role in the 20th Revolution. After the launch of the 20th Revolution in Rumaitha against the British garrison in Iraq, by Shalan Abu al-Jawn, the sheikh of the oppressors, the Iraqi tribes in the Middle Euphrates began to encourage themselves to fight the British forces. A major revolution broke out against the British and began to spread throughout the country. Here, crowds of people gathered to go to the supreme authority in Najaf. It was then represented by His Eminence Muhammad Taqi al-Shirazi to know the religious opinion if the scholars decided the legitimacy of starting the revolution. Then the Shirazi authority issued his famous fatwa, demanding rights as obligatory for the Iraqis, and among their demands they have the right to ensure peace and security, and they may invoke defensive force if the English refuse to accept their demands. The fatwa that gave legitimacy to the revolution and made it religious in nature was the actual launch for it, and people took it upon themselves to fight the colonial forces and support the existing revolution. It turned into a huge spark that spread throughout Iraq. He gave them permission to do so after a meeting held at his home in which he told the major revolutionaries, "If these are your intentions and these are your pledges, then God help you." He issued another fatwa in support of the mounting resistance against the occupiers. Now that your brothers in Baghdad, Khatamiya, Najaf, Karbala, and other parts of Iraq have agreed among themselves to meet and to carry out peaceful demonstrations, and a large group carried out these demonstrations while maintaining security, demanding their legitimate rights resulting in the independence of Iraq, God willing, with an Islamic government. It is your duty, and indeed all Muslims, to agree with your brothers on this honorable principle. Beware of disrupting security, quarreling with one another, for this is harmful to your goals and a waste of your rights, which now is the time to obtain them in your hands. I advise you to protect all the sects and groups in your country, including their souls, their money, and their honor, and never harm any of them. His Eminence had previously issued a fatwa on March 1, 1920 prohibiting dealing with the British in a letter to Jafar Abu al-Taman. We were pleased with the unity of the word of the Baghdadi nation and the rush of its scholars, figures, and notables to demand the legitimate rights of the nation and its sacred goals. So thank God for your efforts and the efforts of your noble brothers and peers. And may God fulfill our hopes and the hopes of your scholars and virtuous people who carried out their Islamic duties. In addition to other fatwas, including his fatwa against colonial movements in the region, including when the British wanted to force the Iraqis to elect Sir Percy Cox, the British High Commissioner, to be Prime Minister of Iraq in 1919 during the Najaf referendum. Al-Shirazi issued his fatwa in response. No Muslim has the right to elect and choose a non-Muslim for the emirate and sultanate over the Muslims. And his fatwa, which was issued by Sayyid Muhammad Taqi in 1914, after the attacks of the Russian forces in northern Iran and the massacres committed against free Iranians, he announced the necessity of confronting the Russian aggressors. He also declared jihad with the rest of the scholars and senior authorities in Iraq against the attacks of the Allied countries on Ottoman lands, and this was at the beginning of World War I. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. I stop at this point today. Thank you for watching. I hope I added something to you.